mate, I'm probably more like 150, 200% out.
Yeah.
So if I'm putting, say, £150,000 in, I'm getting probably maybe double that, in excess of £200,000. My latest one is down in Southend in Essex, which was like a warehouse / office. So I've got planning to convert that into 7 flats and 2 townhouses.
What do you project your GDV to be on?
2.2 and 2.3 million end value. Probably got about £1 million on the bill cost. So 400 purchase, you probably got $1 million on the bill, then you probably got at least another 100,000 of ancillary planning costs, interest. So I'm sort of between 5 and say 700k worth of profit.
Class MA is a massive buzzword at the moment in terms of being able to do things under PD, but you generally always go in for full planning for most of your scheme. Yeah. Why is that?
What people don't realise is
And we are back for another episode of the PBK podcast. Now we are back with a special guest. Gareth, how you doing?
I'm very good, brother. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Gareth, founder of MJ Real Estate. You've been established for how many years?
Probably about 18 years, 19 years now. When I first started.
You're old school. You're long in the tooth. You're showing age.
Yeah, you can see the grey hairs now.
They're coming through slowly. But look, I think today we're going to talk about all things planning, holding versus flipping, what the market currently looks like, things that you think need changing. But for those that are not familiar with you, let's get a little brief intro to who you are and what you do.
Yeah, no, sure. So MJ Real Estate, basically a development and investment business. So I set this business up about 18 years ago, sort of incidentally. So when I bought my first property when I was 19, I bought a house. Got planning, converted it into 2 flats down in Kent. And at the time I was working and going to uni. So somehow managed to keep hold of that. And then very organically over the years, I've just been slowly buying another property, another single flat, another single house. And then it's been the last probably 3.5 years where I've actually started to do my own developments. And within that time frame, I've gone to uni, become a chartered surveyor, worked for all the big corporate house builders. And now I sort of do it for myself. And basically what we look to do is basically retain most of the assets, so keep hold of it and rent it out and collect the income. Do the odd flip here and there, but
So as a starting point, you're buying that first property at 19. Why?
Do you know what? I was in the right environment, to be honest. So I was working part-time in an estate agent and going to uni, doing that part-time as well. And the people around me were buying properties down in Kent, in London, Deptford. And at the time, obviously still living at home, I managed to save up a small pot of money and I sort of followed one of my work colleagues and I bought a house because I could see they were doing well and wow, they've got really nice cars and live very nice lifestyle. It was a nice holiday. So I thought to myself, let me try that. Let me emulate that. I'm in that environment. I want to, live that life. And that's the reason why I fell into it in terms of actually buying my first property. So I was in that right environment that really sort of pushed me to go and do that and buy my first house. Did I know what I was doing? I didn't have a Scooby-Doo, but it all
So you bought your first property 18 years ago?
Yeah.
Did you say?
Yeah.
So timing-wise, you're looking what, pre or post financial crisis?
It was pre, and then there was a financial crisis. So when I bought it, it was all fine. Liquidity in terms of market, fantastic. I bought it in my own personal name, 10% deposit. So obviously it's a lot more affordable. And then I got planning, converted it into 2 flats. And then a year, 2 years later, then we had the financial crisis. I mean, at the time I was renting it out. I didn't sell anything. So it was fine. But then at the time when I was going to uni, if a tenant didn't pay, it was obviously, quite tight because I'm at uni, got to pay for university at the time. So, the market was quite difficult, but I managed to keep hold of it. I had a couple of sleepless nights when tenants weren't paying or paying part payments. But at the time, 19, 20, you sort of just get through it and you work through it.
So give us some more insight into that, because I think it sounds very okay, I just bought a house because I saw people doing it. But I've bought a burger because my friends were getting a burger at a festival. But I think a lot of the time there's a little bit more to it in terms of what gave you the confidence to not only say I'm going to buy a house, but then also be actually this house can be or maybe could be converted into flats.
Yeah.
At 19. How much did you pay for the property?
I paid £149,000 at the time.
Okay. And 10% deposit.
10% deposit down. And I think it cost me something like £20,000 at the time to split the house into 2 flats. obviously this was 19, 20 years ago. You can't spend that sort of money now.
We're going to have to get a little
We're gonna
breakdown
get
of
back into
what
that,
you did there, because that sounds like really you painted it and put up like some temporary partitions.
You'd be surprised. But you know what, the reason why I did it was because, my work colleague was buying a lot of stuff down in Kent. So when I went to see that property, he actually came with me.
Mm-hmm.
So where he was a chartered surveyor, and obviously he's got quite a few properties in Kent, he sort of guided me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those sort of 3-story houses. So it always had that naturally potential to be split into 2 flats. So basically a 2-bedroom like masonette, and then like the lower ground floor was like a single 1-bedroom flat.
Yeah.
And so he came with me on that first viewing, went around there, was like, yeah, definitely got potential. And there was precedent on the road for splitting those houses. So did a little bit of initial DD, but he definitely guided me. So almost in a way, it was almost like a mentor, but without actually saying it, if that makes sense, because he helped guide me down that path. And once we sort of bought it, obviously my dad being a builder, got him down there, came round, and where it was over 3 stories, it already had sort of 2 sets of like kitchens and all this sort of stuff. So actually the subdivision was actually pretty straightforward. Okay, what we're doing is taking out a staircase in the middle. The services were there. We had to split the electrics and the gas. And that was it, obviously the soundproofing, the fireproofing and all that sort of stuff. But my dad sort of took care of that because obviously he's been in the game long enough. So if I'm honest, I was completely wet behind the ears, didn't really know what I was doing. And he sort of really guided me through that construction phase, because at the time I had absolutely didn't really have a clue.
And I think one kind of good takeaway from that for a lot of people is use the resources you have around you. Like, you know, whether it be dad's a builder,
Correct.
cousin's an architect, auntie's a solicitor. Like, when people say, oh, where should I get started? Well, my starting point is always do that SWOT analysis. What do you currently have? Where are your current in-house strengths? Where are those resources that you can lean on? So whether that's saving money on the build, saving money on your legals, being able to have an architect that's going to give you an honest, actual, this has probably got like a 10% chance of getting planning versus somebody who's going to say, yeah, just send us the money and we'll draw what you like.
Absolutely.
Lean on the resources that you have that you already trust. Because firstly, they'll be able to help you. But secondly, they generally will be able to, if they can't help you, give you good referrals as well.
Correct. No, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's really what guided me. So yeah, sort of my work colleague guided me on that first purchase. Then on the construction side, my dad, the legals, again, learn on the job, so to speak. You know, didn't really know. Went to a standard panel solicitor through the estate agent, which wasn't the best, but you learn a lot from it. And then obviously planning, dealing with planning and speaking to the officer and getting an architect around, drawing all that up and sort of worked through it. So for me, it was a real steep learning curve, but I learned quite a lot, made loads of issues, loads of mistakes. But I think it's part of the game, and that's how you naturally evolve in terms of, you know.
So that point, what were interest rates like when you went to refinance around that? I know it's a long time, but roughly?
I think they were about 5 or 6%.
Okay,
so sort of where they are now. That's why when people say, oh, interest rates are so high, well, no, historically they've naturally been around the sort of between the 3 and 4.5%. And that's how you should be working from, to be honest. So when they were historically low, oh, mate, that was amazing. That was a great time to refinancing and buying properties very smartly. But now where rates are, I think that's where they're going to be. You've got to make your asset work. Your asset should be working hard for you. You know, these 0.5, 1% don't really exist. You know, that was a one-off historic event, which is probably never going to come around again for a very long time.
Yeah, I mean, if you were smart enough to like lock in, which I've seen a few people that had like 10-year products.
Yes.
And they're living a very good life right now.
Absolutely.
Like, a lot of people with 10-year products, when I see their social medias, they're just in Bali relaxing. They're like, well, I'll deal with the rising rates when I get back. But for now, they're cash flowing very nicely.
No, absolutely.
What did you go and study at university?
So initially I studied business studies as my undergrad. Then I did a master's in real estate, University of Reading, and then that allowed me to become a sort of chartered surveyor. And so learning real estate was, you learn about land and planning, law, construction, appraisal. So it was a real you covered all facets of the built environment in terms of real estate, which is good.
So question for you, because I get asked this quite a lot, but I've never studied it. So you can hopefully answer the question now. For somebody that wants to get into property development, investment, but actually doesn't want to work for somebody else, like as a professional, would you still say there's value in them doing that qualification?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because you know what, you learn the theory side behind it. You learn the paperwork behind it. You learn, how to really pull together an appraisal. And I think that's the theory, but then obviously you've got the practical side, which is where you learn the most. But I think having the theory side in the background does give you a little advantage because, you understand how to put together an appraisal, and you understand the basics of landlord and tenant law, and you have a basic understanding of the construction field. And I think it just gives you a good grounding, bit of foundations to allow you to then springboard from that. So I think it's definitely worth doing. But I think where you learn the most is definitely on the practical side of things in terms of actually doing it yourself or following someone or mentoring. So I think both have very good positives and benefits. I mean, obviously when you're studying, you've got 3 years of solid studying, but I think, yes, you learn stuff, but also you make a network of friends. And those network of friends, in the future, when they all get to very senior positions, they really do open doors for you.
I think that's one thing I've definitely found. Those that have studied a professional vocation somewhere in a property or property related field, they find it a lot easier to grow at pace because they're a lot more confident in the delivery and the exposure to larger type of schemes or bigger problems, but also they have a network to leverage that if they don't know something, they'll know somebody that does.
Yeah, correct. No, absolutely. And I've found that over the last probably 3 to 4 years, I've got friends at all the big construction companies, consultants, all different, property companies where they're in senior positions that I can probably pick up the phone to and say, hey mate, how you doing? Yeah, how you doing, Gareth? Yeah. And they can essentially open a door or point you in the right direction. And I think the property industry is a people's business. It's all about who you know and trying to dot the dots. And I think if you can pick up the phone to somebody because somebody works for that firm, it does make things a bit easier. Definitely, that's for sure.
So what's your strategy at the moment?
Basically, build to rent. Build it, or buy a site, get planning permission, convert it or build it, and then rent it and refinance and go again. But where we buy sites without planning permission, that gives us the big upside in terms of the value. So we're able to get all of our equity back out plus some, and then we go again. So that's basically it.
So generally for most of your deals, you would say you're getting all of your money back out?
Mate, I'm probably more like 150, 200% out.
Yeah.
So if I'm putting, I don't know, say £150,000 in, I'm getting probably maybe double that or over in excess of 200,000 back, plus then retaining the assets. So the return becomes infinite because I've got no money tied up, and I lock it all in a 5-year, 75% loan to value sort of product.
Nice. And what type of sites do you actually look for?
Generally, for the last couple of years, I've been buying disused commercial buildings. So I bought a couple of pubs, so public houses. So I think because of obviously, COVID and slowdown of people going out, a lot of public houses fell into financial difficulty. So I was able to snap up 2 or 3 different pubs where I've gone in, changed one into a 15-bedroom HMO, which done really, really well, which was a direct-to-vendor deal. And then another one I bought from a large sort of national agent, and I converted that into 4 2-bedroom flats and a 3-bedroom bungalow because it had like a single-lane bowling alley at the back. So I managed to split the title. Okay. So I did really clever structuring of that. I bought commercial buildings, but I've changed it into resi. So my latest one is down in Southend in Essex, which was like a warehouse/office. So I've got planning to convert that into 7 flats and 2 townhouses. So yeah, my real bread and butter is really commercial buildings, but I can go in, get planning permission and convert it into resi.
For a lot of people looking at that, the numbers are amazing, the potential uplift, the rent roll, the infinite return on investment. However, for a lot of people, the scary part would be but what if I don't get planning?
Yeah.
Like pubs, for example, I've looked at pubs and then we see a lot of stuff around, you've got to prove it's been marketed for X amount of time, that there's no demand for a public house in the area, that it can't be. So bearing in mind that you are buying non-conditionally, so you are taking on the risk, how do you mitigate those risks? Let me pause the video for a quick word from our sponsors. Now let me put you onto something that could seriously level up your property game. When I started investing, I didn't fully grasp the benefits of using a limited company structure, but here's the deal: over 75% of new UK investment properties are now purchased through limited companies. Now why? Because it's a more tax efficient way of purchasing. You can claim your mortgage interest reliefs, benefits from lower corporation tax rates, plus it sets sets you up nicely for scaling your property portfolio and passing on wealth to the next generation. Simply put, it can help you increase your margin. Now, setting up and managing a limited company might sound daunting, but that's where GetGround come in. They handle the entire process for you, from setting up your company in days to managing your accounts and tax returns and ensuring compliance, all under one roof. They even help you find financing to help you fund your investments, your own dedicated consultant, and a completely digital dashboard to track and manage the performance of your investments. But because I'm serious about giving back, I've got a great offer for you. GetGround is offering a free investment consultation plus 3 months of free accounting and tax services when you sign up through my link. Now, this is a huge opportunity to get started on the right foot. So if you're serious about building or optimizing your portfolio, then check out the link in the description. Fill out the form for a free consultation and claim your 3 months of free services. Don't miss out on this. You can even transfer existing buy-to-let companies over to GetGround and still take advantage of the amazing offer. Now back to the video.
But you know what? It's lucky where I've always worked in the land and planning field with the national house builders. I've got a really good feeling of looking at planning. So I can look at a site and quickly look at policy, look at site planning history, and work out, have I got a good chance? When I'm looking at pubs, I know, is the pub located in a protected area? Is it town centre? And there's a lot of things that you look for. Has it been on the market for a while? So I do my sort of due diligence up front. Once I'm comfortable, I'll then get a second opinion through my planning consultant. Well, what do you think about this? Yep, Gav. Yeah, looks good. Okay, let's roll the dice. I'll normally try and do a pre-application, which I advise most people to do, because it just takes away that element of risk and gives you a bit of security, so the council are on board. And I think what people don't realise is a disused pub just sits there empty, not really doing anything. It's unmaintained.
It ends up with squatters. It can end up being a fire risk
and all sorts. And actually, also what you find is the neighbours' properties actually increase in value, because it's very difficult to buy properties beside or above a pub, because lenders do not like it, and people don't realise that. So these neighbours should be saying, "Yep, guys, crack on, change it, please convert it."
Sometimes it's not even beside. Sometimes they'll be like, "There's a pub down the road, across the just in audible." Distance, so you could hear the pub, and that's enough for them to be like, we'll give you 60% loan to value. Just because of fire sale risk means it could be a lot more difficult to sell.
Correct. And I think the beauty of what we do is, where we've done so many conversions now, we've got a really good document, almost like a dossier document, showing the pubs we bought before and after. I mean, I think when you're showcasing that to the council, showing this is what we do, this is how we bring back the pubs and disused commercial, it really hits home that we're bringing homes back to the community. And I think that is a massive advantage in terms of when we go to sit down with the councils. So I think that certainly helps us. And what we always try to do is maintain the name of the pub. So, we've got a pub that's called the Drew Drop Inn, and we maintain that name with Drew Drop Inn, flats 1 to 4. Do you know what I mean? And I think part of the history, and we always try and keep the signs, if they've got stained glass windows. And I think all that adds to the character and the history. And I think it's a nice way to demonstrate back to the council and the locals that, we do care and we are bringing back homes, but it's with a bit of love.
Are any of the ones that you've purchased, have any of them been listed buildings?
No.
Would you buy one that's a listed building?
No, wouldn't touch a listed building, no.
I'm just, do you know what? I met a few people recently that have done them. One probably didn't have the worst experience.
Yeah.
One probably did have the worst experience. And they got to a point where it's like, well, that wall is listed, so you can't touch the wall.
Yeah.
But you also can't use the wall. So you've got to just build in front of this wall. We've got to retain a wall that no one's ever going to see again.
Yeah. It's hard work. I've worked on listed buildings in the past, not personally, but through my corporate background. And, they are, when you finish a listed building, they are amazing assets, right? But you have to go through a lot of hoops. And I think planning takes a lot longer because you've got a lot more consultation, heritage officer, historic England. And then at the same time, then when you're actually building it, there's a lot more that needs to go in terms of the build. It's not just straightforward, throwing up partitionings, changing windows. There's a lot more that goes into it. So I think, if you want to do listed buildings, you've got to really have a solid power team and know what you're doing, because it's not for the faint-hearted.
I think I would like there was a scheme. It was just two, dilapidated houses. No, it was one dilapidated house that had planning to turn it into basically 2 semis rather than detached. And the building was beautiful.
Yeah.
It was on a Hamlet Road, I think, in Crystal Palace. Really nice road. You're talking millions per unit. But it sat there, and I think everybody just looked at it and just said, the what if factor of what if, like, they had some lovely masonry work.
Yeah.
That the person who's going to have to restore that, I don't even want to talk about their day rate. Their hourly rate alone is going to be scary.
Yeah. No, exactly. It's not easy, and I just don't think it's one for us. But there are people out there who like it, and good luck to them.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it is. That is the definition of a labour of love.
Yeah, proper.
You have to really enjoy it.
Really enjoy it, yeah.
Okay, so obviously you're buying them non-conditionally.
Yeah.
You've spoken quite frequently about the value of the people you have around you.
Yeah.
You mentioned obviously doing pre-planning, but do you always engage with a planning consultant? Sometimes you just use architects, or is it always a combination?
It's normally a combination. I think you need the architects to pull together the plans. Yeah. But I mean, ultimately, I always have my vision in my head. I can see how the subdivision can work. And if I'm honest, sometimes I'm more dictating to the architects. Right, I can see it working by doing X, Y, and Z. Now they might make some tweaks to it. Gareth, you need to do this because of building regs and for planning reasons. But generally, I've got quite a good vision in my head, and I explain almost like the project brief to the architect, to the planning consultant.
You give them sort of top level, and then they would say, this might need moving because,
correct,
the last time you did this was this, and actually post Grenfell, they've changed this, so we need to make provisions for X.
Distances for this, the fire escape. So, and I think actually what you tend to find is when you start to do slightly bigger projects, your team around you slightly changes in terms of you might use slightly bigger architects or planning. I mean, my planning consultant is quite consistent, but you definitely your consultant team definitely does evolve as you do more difficult and larger projects. Definitely, that's for sure. But I think for me, having really good architect, planning consultant, absolutely key in terms of driving forward good projects.
What do you think of planning?
Planning needs a lot of help. It needs some major changes. It's something that obviously the government are trying to focus on now, but I think they really need to streamline it.
In terms of additional fees, 'cause obviously a lot of people are now familiar with, maybe your 1 to 2 bedrooms, your straightforward refurbs. What are other costs that, property investors or developers would need to consider with a scheme such as yours?
Yeah. So I think on slightly larger schemes, you obviously have your, so just starting from the beginning, you'll have obviously your planning application or your pre-application fee. Obviously, you'll have your architects, your planning consultant fees. You might have to do some additional reports. So you might have to do sunlight, daylight. You might have to do transport.
I feel like you've underplayed some of these reports. There can be a lot of like ecology reports.
Sunlight, daylight. You can have transport. You can have my original scheme where I had 11 units, I had to actually do a viability because we triggered the affordable housing because we was going over 9. So we had a viability consultant report, and I had to pay for that by a big consultancy firm, which was very, very expensive.
How much do you think it was?
It was about £6,000 or £7,000, which was now unnecessary because I dropped it down to 9 units.
Yeah.
So I've just literally, I might as well just taken £6,000-7,000 and just thrown out the window because I got nothing from it. Literally.
Could use it for golf clubs.
Oh, could do. It's a nice set. That's quite a nice set.
Is that a good set of golf clubs?
That's a very good set. That's about 2 sets. To be fair.
He's convinced me to come and play golf with him, and I've been arguing that it's more of a skill than a sport, and you're not that happy about that.
That's not necessarily true, is it?
Well,
we'll show you in a couple of weeks.
It's just fancy walking, really, isn't it? It's just walking with tools.
Not in the golf buggies and stuff. It's not.
Oh, sorry. Are we gonna have golf buggies?
Not for you.
Fair. Okay, sorry, but I digress. So differences. So you've obviously got planning application, some of the reports,
but loads of reports. You'll also have you might have some financing costs. If depending on how you bought it, structured it, you might have your monthly reoccurring fees from your finance. I think that's probably it. I mean, there's loads of other little bits I'm sure that I've really missed out there. For
me, like a few of the bigger ones, obviously services. Just if a lot of the time, depending on where you are, if you're going from, somewhere that's maybe single phase, for example, in terms of what you're going to need for upgrades. Are you generally now going full electric, or are you still using gas?
Full electric. There's no point. I mean, the downside you've got with going full electric is the EPCs, because the way they assess the properties, they prefer carbon footprint than a full electric, which is very, very annoying.
It's ironic almost, because gas is supposed to be seen as dirtier, less energy efficient, or less cleaner.
Correct.
But from an efficiency standpoint, unfortunately, a lot of the electrical systems haven't actually caught up from an efficiency. So you're in this sort of catch-22 of we are moving away from gas. However, from a grading standpoint, gas still is going to get you a better rating.
Yeah, no, exactly. But I think that might change. They are reforming EPCs, so I'm hoping that comes forward. Because, I think nowadays it's electric, water, you get your three phase. I mean, that's the good thing with buying commercial is there's normally three phase in there.
Yeah.
So all you're then doing is actually creating a new sub meter and then creating.
Nice
so actually,
rifle
board, yeah, exactly. So that's a lot cheaper. Yes, your water, you have to get your 9 separate individual supplies in, which can be costly.
Water's gone up a lot, hasn't it?
Water's very, very expensive.
I think, when was it? 17, 18, took the subsidies away from the water. So it went up like 70%.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably costing about £1,000 per new supply for water, which includes all the digging and trenching. And then obviously you also got the your BT and your fibre. Yeah. That's now gone up. Yeah. Before you could put in, copper, but now to go in fibre, it's something like £500 or £600 per unit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I'm trying to have this debate at the moment with BT, but unfortunately it is what it is, and you need that. And now you need to install EV charging.
Oh, okay, yeah.
For all new schemes. Again, another big cost because you need to have the supply.
Do you, because obviously as an existing residential homeowner, you get subsidies for the EV points. Do you still get those as a new home builder, or do you have to pay market rate?
Pay market rate to put it in. And you have to put it in as part of planning.
Well, so
because they want renewable energies.
There are a lot of costs to consider in it. And that's the other thing. You just, in terms of putting in applications, a lot of schemes, they will end up saying you do need solar panels. Yeah. You do need some type of consideration. Yes. So I think, top level, it's when you're working out, for those that are potentially looking at doing what you're doing, it's really important to have somebody who's walked the walk before, because there's so many little intricacies of, you might have just done a refurb of a house where you've got no services, you've got no requirements in terms of, for example, soundproofing, sound testing at the end, air testing.
That's right.
You don't have new build home warranties.
Yes.
You don't have so many other of these little moving parts. And in isolation, it's like you said, it might be, internet, £500. But then, actually, you've got to do this soundproofing. That's actually going to cost you 6,000. Yeah. Actually, you've got to do this warranty. That's going to cost you 5. And before you know it, you could have added 30, 40,000 pounds to a build cost. And by the time you go across 4 units, you're in, 6 figures, and it adds up. And so you need to make sure that you do understand, which is why, as much as I say, conversions, new builds can be amazing numbers wise, you need to know what those numbers are.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the thing with us is where we've done it so many times now, we've got that almost formula. Yeah. We've got that checklist.
You've got exactly, you know what to work through.
You know exactly what to budget. So it's even stuff like registering the postal addresses. Yeah. Gav, what are you going to name this? Yeah. This, that, and that. Then it needs to go off to the Royal Mail.
Even that, if you want to name it, it's an extra £200.
Exactly. Okay, fine. You've got your name back. And then you can then send that off to go and get your meter reference numbers. And
even to get your name approved, they're going to have to check it with the fire brigade to make sure the fire brigade can pronounce it.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. And then it goes for council tax. It's a real long list of things that you need to go through. But, once you've done it once, you've got that checklist, you know exactly what you need to do. So what we try to do is just front load all these small little things just to get it all done. But you budget for it as well.
And I think that's what's really important. I always say, with property development, realistically, there's so many transferable skill sets from different job roles in terms of managing multiple spinning plates. But it's not that you can't do it. It's when you miss something, the impact that can have later down the line if you're trying to do it retrospectively. Yeah. And the cost of a retrospective new build warranty, it could be 5x the cost of doing it in situ. Yes. And then you obviously touched on also with this scheme, the difference between falling into affordable housing / not. For those that are not familiar, can you just give a little bit more information in terms of what that means?
Yeah, certainly, yeah. So every council will have a different affordable housing threshold. So certain boroughs might be anything over 2 units, and you have to provide some sort of either affordable housing on site, or you pay like an off-site contribution. So with this particular borough, it's anything over 9 units and over, you have to provide, I think it's like 30 or 40% affordable housing. So they want either like an affordable rent or a shared ownership product within your development.
And does that trigger from the 10th unit? Or if you go to 10, do they want 30% of the entire 10?
They want 30% of the entire 10.
So a lot of the times then for you, when you were doing the numbers and you went from 9 to 11, it probably ended up around the same place.
But what you can do with affordable housing is you can do a viability assessment, which then pushes back against providing it, because you're saying, actually, my scheme can't stomach it because of the numbers.
There's not enough.
There's not enough money in it in return for the developer.
To give you 30%
Correct.
of affordable housing.
So it might be say, okay, we can't do 2 or 3 units as affordable housing. However, we can make a financial contribution of X, which then still keeps my developer's profit at say 20%, which is the industry norm. And then the council then get that commuted sum to put towards affordable housing within their borough. So they can obviously pull the money together across their schemes to put it together. So I mean, affordable housing is absolutely key and get it. But I think on smaller schemes, it's really important that you have those early dialogues with the council, because I think, it can really affect your financial viability, how you get it financed, because ultimately that all needs to be financed in terms of the affordable housing.
Oh, for sure. We see a lot of people that when they're talking about commercial schemes, Class MA is a massive sort of buzzword at the moment, in terms of being able to do things under PD. But you generally always go in for full planning for most of your schemes.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Why is that?
The reason is just flexibility. Obviously, Class MA, you can't, change the facade. So you've got to work with that. I mean, if you've got a scheme where you can work within, the permitted development right effectively, then great.
Yeah.
But I think where mine are a bit more complex and I'm making changes, I'm having to go down the detailed planning application route. And I think the benefit is I can make more changes, because I think if you go Class MA, you've then got to then submit another one if you want to make external changes. So I just like to bite the bullet initially, make all the big changes, but obviously you do that through your pre-app to make sure we're fully aligned with the council. And I just think it's just for me, just makes better, and I like to rather just go in for my full scheme on day one, knowing that I've got the support of the council. Okay, it might take a little bit longer, an extra 4 to 5 weeks, but as long as I get the right result in the end, for me, that's the thing. And I think, are there loads of PD schemes now that a lot of these PD schemes have been bought now?
Yeah, that's the other thing. I think
that's really not as good as it used to be now.
Yeah, there's the really good ones. There is a lot of the profits are just eroded away through competition.
Yeah,
and because it's almost like buying, I guess, a scheme with planning, and it's very clear what you can do.
Correct.
So the vendor is going to say, well, under PD, this is going to be worth £1 million. I know your build cost is 300,000, so I'm happy to sell it to you for 500 on the basis that you can make 200, but that doesn't include all of your other fees that are associated. So I think, going in for planning, you are then basically being able to create your own value rather than that value being assigned to you by the vendor.
Exactly that, because what you're finding now, a lot of the estate agents know PD and MA, Class MA. So all they're doing is they sticking in that hope value on the price.
That's it.
So you're not actually gaining anything really, because you're buying it in from day one. Whereas I think we're buying stuff where Class MA is not necessarily there and you've got to go detailed, we're picking it up slightly cheaper. But the biggest thing is there's less competition. And
that's the thing. I think when people ask me about how do you operate in different markets, so one of the most important things is education and experience, and a combination of the two is what really sets you apart from other property developers, because the money is made from the opportunities that you can see that others have missed. When the opportunity is obvious and everybody can see it, all the profits get eroded, which is why, you said, the hope value on Class MA, for us doing the 1 to 2 beds in nice areas, a lot of the housing associations now in the description put potential to be converted into 2 bed. They just assign the value. The same with if you see, an end plot, potential to build an additional unit. Now, whether or not you can or can't, there is going to be a hope value assigned to that, because the person without the added information is going to buy on the hope potential.
Correct. And so what's the point doing it? Because then that additional profit margin to take on the risk is now eroded. And so, if you can buy sites, ideally that don't have the potential, or actually it's all about seeing the angles. If you can find the angles and the opportunities, that's really where you can find the opportunity. Because I think as the market evolves, you need to change your strategy and find different things. And I think there's always new ways of, making money a bit more straightforward in the property industry without having to pay over the odds for it and take on loads of risk.
Before we touch on some specific examples of actual projects you've done, my final question around the conversion space is actually on something that gets missed obviously by a lot of people, which is potentially your SIL. For the type of schemes that you do, are you paying SIL? Is it because it's not all classed as a new build? Where do you kind of sit, and what do you expect to pay?
Yeah, most of my stuff I've done, I pay no SIL because I'm working within the existing massing. So if I'm doing a conversion, I truly try and do a conversion. So my current project in Southend in Essex, we've demoed, it was about a 6,000 square foot building. So it's quite a big size building.
Yeah,
and we've demolished probably about 1,000 square foot to create this central courtyard. But we've put that space back by doing these new pitched roofs and adding bedrooms into those pitched roofs. So we're still below what the existing building footprint was. So there's no SIL. So generally, most of the buildings I work with, to keep the build cost down and to get in and out quickly, because obviously I'm recycling my funds and my equity, we generally try not to do any new build elements to it, if that makes sense, because then we can just get in and out quickly, 9-10 months, we move on, if that makes sense. So luckily, I've been okay. Fortunate enough where I've been paying no SIL.
Even on some of my smaller schemes, I've been getting kicked with, because if you, for example, we would buy a semi-detached property, but we're doing a double-story side, rear and loft conversion. We're adding a further footprint. So it's we're trying to be but the loft was already usable. So we're trying to negotiate and go. To be fair, councils, when you're adding good new homes, they will kind of have a little bit of flexibility sometimes. And it is. I think one thing people don't always realize is everything is up for negotiation.
Absolutely.
So see a scheme and see that, I don't know, the SIL on something, the community infrastructure levy, is 40 grand. But if that kind of makes it not non-viable, but not as attractive, and you go back and you explain why, sometimes I think we can get it halved, can get it down to a quarter and pay 30 to 70% less sometimes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it will come down to the SIL officer as well.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you've got to understand the guidelines and how it works. You've got to have a good architect.
If your argument makes sense within the parameters that are allowed,
exactly, then there might be something there. But generally it's SIL, mayoral SIL, Section 106. If you're doing that side of stuff, then you've got to just factor in within your numbers. So as far as I'm concerned, these sort of numbers are a zero-sum game, because if you've done your numbers at the start, your profit line should still be the same, and that is the biggest thing.
And that, I think, is the crux of actually what property development is all about. Do your numbers right. There are some costs that are just costs. It's just the cost of doing. When people say,
correct,
but you had to pay stamp duty, I'm like, it's just a cost.
It's just
there's not, if your deals only work without stamp duty, it's not a deal. You've just basically avoided a tax. It's tax avoidance.
Well, exactly that. And that's why I'm like, as long as your numbers are right, okay, you've got to pay your SIL or your Section 106, your affordable housing, but your profit margin is still the same. And actually, if you can get betterment on those numbers, well, that's great, because it just goes to the bottom line, right? And that's additional betterment that you haven't factored in. But for me, as long as you know what you're doing, you've done your numbers right, all these sort of costs are just costs. It's just part of the development game.
Yeah. No, definitely. Okay, so let's talk about a specific deal. Probably best to talk about one that's active. So your current project, how much did you purchase that for?
So my current project in Southend, I bought it for £400,000, just over £400,000. Obviously, you've got planning costs on top of that, probably cost me another.
And that was a public house?
No, it wasn't. So my Southend one was a sort of commercial warehouse building in a courtyard off a main road, and 6,000 square foot building, so quite a large building. The owners were retiring, so I stepped in there and purchased it, and got planning to convert it into 7 flats and 2 townhouses.
And with that one, What do you project your GDV to be on that?
I reckon between 2.2 and 2.3 million end value. I've probably got about £1 million on the build costs in terms of all the build, all the services, the new electrics and new water coming through. So 400 purchase, you probably got £1 million on the build, then you probably got at least another 100,000 of ancillary planning costs, interest. So I'm sort of between 5 and say 700k worth of profit.
And on a deal like that, how do you actually structure that deal from a finance perspective?
So on that particular deal, I structured that quite clever where I exchanged, but I had delayed completion for 9 months. So exchange, put my 10% deposit down. Once my deposit went down, had my application ready, submitted my planning application. Well, I had a pre-app first of all before I exchanged to make sure what I'm bringing forward was supported, which it was. And the good thing is, one of the things the agents missed was the site I was buying was actually already allocated for residential.
Yeah.
And this property was on the market for about a year, and how no one snapped it up, I don't understand.
And that's what I just touched on earlier with it. It's about what other people miss.
Yeah.
So the fact that it was already allocated for residential meant that the planning was really not a given, but it was very likely you're going to get something.
Correct.
But it's about how it's advertised, and some of the best deals come from things that are misadvertised. So if you go and see a flat in southeast London that's being marketed by an auction house in Birmingham, chances are you're a lot more likely to get a good price.
Yes, correct.
One of like my more favorite projects that I did recently was just a flat that was being advertised as a rundown 4-bedroom flat that owned the freehold. You just check it, you say, oh, why is this? This doesn't look right. It's been on the market for about 18 months. It had been 2 flats for the last 40 years.
Yeah.
So it was 2 flats. It was just, they just never granted leases. So
correct.
The value was already there, and all I was doing was a refurb of 2 flats.
Yeah.
But again, it's about misrepresentation. So
yeah.
when you've done the delay completion on this, purchase 400,000, delay completion, you now completed once you had planning.
Once I got planning,
What were you able to, like, what was the structure of the lending that you were able to get?
Yeah, so basically what I ended up doing was on completion, obviously I had a particular lender all lined up. So because I bought the site, obviously with delayed completion, and I bought it obviously based on its current value, which is an office. There was a massive uplift in the value of the land once it had consent.
Yeah.
So what it enabled me to do was to put less equity down into the purchase, because in essence, the land value's gone up because it's now got consent.
So you built the equity into it.
So I built equity in. I mean, I still had to put a bit more money into it, but it was very, very little. Maybe an additional maybe 10% on completion, and then the rest of it was all funded via my lenders, and then obviously they fund 100% of the build. But because I created that additional value in the land, so I could have sold that property with the land with the planning permission gain.
Yeah. And so, for example, you, like you said, maybe put in like a 10% deposit just because you have to put something in a lot of the time. We just have some skin in the game.
Yes, correct.
If you didn't have planning on that land and just purchased it with no delay completion, what do you think your best case would have been on loan to value for that site?
It would have been probably 60%.
Yeah, 60%. I was going to say 50 to 60 sort of
max
is where you'd be.
Absolutely max, yeah.
So you can see there instantly, in terms of the amount of money you need to do the deal, you've gone from maybe 40,000 day one plus the planning app to having it being actually £200,000. So straight away, in terms of the way you look at your return on investment is based on the way you can structure deals.
Absolutely. I think that's absolutely key. And it's being able to structure deals, add value, and then obviously get in and out quite quickly, because obviously your interest is racking up on a monthly basis because it's all rolling. So for me, it's having that delayed completion, complete, discharge a couple of pre-commencement conditions, which obviously you need to submit to the council to enable you to commence on site. And then we started, and we were able to, we're currently on site and we're making good progress.
And bearing in mind that you've got development finance for the entire build, what sort of amount of money it's £1 million build, right?
Yeah.
And they pay you in arrears for your finance. What sort of amount of money would you say a prospective property investor developer would need to be able to start the build?
So your initial first payment might be in the region of about £100,000.
Yeah.
So I think for something like this, in terms of equity to be comfortable, you need £250,000 quid.
Yeah.
And that's to be comfortable, to know that actually, if I don't get planning, I might need to complete. You've got the money there.
Yeah.
You've still got to fund, obviously your stamp duty. You've still got to fund your planning costs, your legal costs. And then when you've got funding, you've then got to pay for valuation. You've got to pay for their lending and their legal costs, sorry. So, there is a lot of upfront costs. The development is very cash heavy, and then you're obviously not getting your return back until the end of the project. But I'd say you need probably a good £250,000 to be comfortable, to know that, okay, I've got everything fully funded and I'm not having sleepless nights.
And in terms of time frame, from, I guess, even from exchange to you exiting and stabilizing the asset, so having it fully rented out, what do you reckon in terms of time frame?
So I reckon, I think the build's going to be about 11 months, 10 to 11 months. And then I reckon the rental market is very, very strong at the moment, if I'm honest. So, and I think with its location and the type of demographics, we'll be full within a month, I reckon. And then we're in great new products with parking. So I reckon from start to finish, I'd probably say 13, 14 months, probably quite comfortably.
So I mean, so in terms of, like, if we just took sort of the baseline round numbers of you need £250,000 to do the deal. If your uplift is £500,000 plus, you're still looking at circa, even if you annualize it, 180% return on investment. If you were to compare it to other asset classes, we have to do the work as the property developers.
Absolutely.
Unlike, the crypto guys or the other stocks and shares guys had recently, that maybe do less heavy lifting. But I think there's a lot more of the asset actualization of the value that's in-house and is controllable. So
correct.
We never pretend there's no sleepless nights in property. But I do think there's sleepless nights that even in your nightmares you can imagine a solution. Whereas in crypto it's just like, what's gonna happen?
No, exactly.
What's Donald Trump gonna do tomorrow?
Correct, absolutely. And that's the thing. There's always a plan A, plan B, and a plan C with property. And I think it's a tangible asset. With property, it's a finite commodity in the sense of, the land ain't growing. We've got a set, allocation of land, and it's a solid asset that you can go and see and touch, and it's sort of controlled by you. Yes, you have some external market factors, but you know what the value is. It's not a liquid asset, so you can't just sell it like that. I don't think, but you have that.
But there is a, like, I always say that with property, it's like you can really mess it up, and there's still a value of the land. There's still a value. You can be halfway through a refurb and there's still a value. Whereas a lot of, like, when you look at businesses, if a business, for example, if you were the pub owner and the pub had a really bad fight and lost its license, that value of that asset, because you can't trade, can drop to almost zero. Correct. It is very different in that instance when you compare, like, property to business and to other sort of, maybe more liquid but a lot more volatile asset classes.
Yeah, correct. And I think that's what we like about it. Bricks and mortar is a bit more stable, and you sort of know what you're dealing with and how to manage it.
How many projects have you done to date? Since you're doing them for yourself as opposed to for...
Gonna have to count 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't know, maybe over 10. Over 10, yeah.
And obviously, where you hold a lot of your assets in the build to rent space, do you have like a number in mind in terms of whether it's number of units or whether it's cash flow in terms of the portfolio?
Do you know what? I ask myself that question every day, and I still don't know what the answer is, if I'm honest, because I sort of change my mind a lot. And look, I'm still in my mid to late 30s, so I'm in the very early stages of my career. Am I thinking about hanging up and retiring? No, not anytime soon. Because if I'm honest, I believe you make most of your money in your 40s and your 50s. So I think I'm in my infancy of still growth. So I'm going to just keep doing what I'm doing. I enjoy what I do. And if one day I wake up feeling like, actually, I don't want to do it anymore, then at that point I might slow down. But I think for now, I've got quite a nice balance with my family and doing what I want to do and playing golf and going on site and going to the office.
Wow. We're going to get him over to paddle. I know. Soon, by the way.
So, do you know what? I just keep going until I don't enjoy it, if that makes sense. And I wake up every day enjoying and giving thanks to God that, I enjoy doing what I do. So
that's amazing. We really appreciate it. I think it's been a really insightful conversation, all things in terms of conversions, in terms of, going down the full planning route, non-conditional. So it's been really beneficial, and hopefully you guys have enjoyed it. If you've got any questions, feel free to let us know in the comment section. If people want to connect with you and find you, how can they? How can I get in touch?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn. My Instagram handle is MJ_real_estate_UK.
Yeah.
But hopefully you can stick it on your
Yeah,
screen.
no, of course it'll be there. But just some people, the Spotify listeners,
Spotify,
different places, so we want to make
absolutely.
sure that we do cater to everyone.
Awesome.
Okay, amazing. Well, thank you very much for coming on. If you haven't already, please make sure you subscribe so we can continue to get amazing guests just like we have today. And I'm going to be back next week for another episode. Peace.